shooting, I took the jeans. For the newest one, I thought.
is going internally for you. Check 1 2 1 2 3 4. Test 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 1 2 1 2 3 4. Check 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 1 2 1 2 1 2 3 4. Check 1 2 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8. Check 1 2 1 2. Check check check. It's not coming up super high on the mult box. Check 1 2. Is it okay for everyone else? It's fine for you?
It's okay. It's flipping a little bit, but it's usable.
Check 1 2 1 2 1 2 3 4. Check 1 2 1 2. Check 1 2 1 2. Check 1 2 1 2 3 4. Test 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 1 2 1 2 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 10. Check check check. Everyone else okay? Yep. Looks like we're good.
Within about a couple minutes or so. City leaders will be responding to the Minnesota Department of Human Rights investigation into the City of Minneapolis Police Department. I just want to give a reminder that leaders, including Mayor Frey, including the City Attorney's Office, are still digging into the 71-page report, and so the remarks and reactions that will be shared today are initial and high level at this stage, and we will have a chance to take some questions at the end, but this is really our initial response from the city, so thank you.
Good afternoon. I want to start by thanking the Minnesota Department of Human Rights for their thorough investigation and the report that we received this morning, which covered the last 10 years of conduct through the Minneapolis Police Department and in our city. From the very beginning, we welcomed this report and made a full commitment to cooperate transparently and provide all of the documents and information that we possibly could so that we collectively can get this right. There have been so many instances in the past where an investigation has been conducted, findings have been had, recommendations have been given, and then the action ultimately fell short. This time, it needs to be different. I want to thank our city staff that really stepped up in extraordinary fashion to make sure that all of these documents, which is hundreds of thousands over these last 10 years, were produced in full, and that we could get full and fair input and findings from the Minnesota Department of Human Rights. So I didn't run for re-election because I thought that there was no problem with policing. I didn't take this job because we believed the work was done. We have a hell of a lot of work to do as a city. We have a hell of a lot of work to do in this nation. I read the report, most of it anyway, this morning. I found the contents to be repugnant, at times horrific. They made me sick to my stomach and outraged, and I think that our community feels the same way. There are some in our city that will be surprised by the findings that they saw in this report. I talked with leaders from our black community this morning, and they're not surprised at all. They've been saying this for years, for decades, and for generations. They've been talking about the misconduct that was identified. They've been talking about the need for a culture shift we need to not just acknowledge, but do something about and act with precision. Our black community deserves better. Our black community deserves respect. People of color, broadly speaking, deserve respect. Our LGBTQ community deserve respect. Women in our city deserve respect. Every single person, resident, business owner, worker, you name it, deserves to have and be treated with respect. There is honor in the work of service. There's honor in this work of getting up every morning and doing a tremendous job on behalf of an extraordinary city. Whether that's picking up the trash or cleaning the streets, whether that is keeping people safe, or making sure that people have safe and affordable housing, there's honor in that work. There is not honor in the substance of the report that we've seen. I know that there are people within our police department that similarly feel that the substance contained in the report is horrific. In addition to the culture that, let me be clear, needs to be shifted, there are officers that wake up every single morning, that wear the badge they do and the uniform that they do because they want to make the city a safer place. To those officers that get up and do that work, we appreciate you. At the same time, we need to make sure that this kind of misconduct is held accountable. We all need to recognize the collective shortcomings from it. I heard from leaders in our black community that this was not just about the 10 years that were covered within this report, but the shortcomings have stemmed long, long before that. I feel this conviction to my core right now to make these changes. Some of them long overdue, and I don't think there's a mayor in this entire country that doesn't wish that they had acted sooner or with more urgency. We feel that urgency, and at the same time, we got to get this right. The people who are up here with me are united in that conviction for change. The people up here with me are united in the mentality that this is an opportunity right now to do things differently, to transform what has been broken, to shift the culture, not just in policing, but even more broadly. We also have an opportunity in the shift of structure of government, which is presently being debated through our city. We have an opportunity to provide a comprehensive approach to public safety because not every 911 call requires response from a police officer with a gun. We have an opportunity to make sure that everyone is treated with the respect and the dignity that they deserve, that everyone and every division and department within an office of community safety operates with a comprehensive approach, whether that's mental health response, police officer response, fire, or the necessary outreach that we need in our city. There's a whole lot of work ahead, and I think we all collectively feel that conviction right now. We haven't been sitting on our hands. We've been working very hard to make the necessary policy changes, and we can go through a litany of them. But policy shift alone is not going to cut the mustard on this one. It's not going to make the difference that we need. It's got to be more than that. It's got to be a full-on culture shift, and I know that our city and the people who are standing here behind me, we are up to the task, and we are all in. Again, I want to thank the Minnesota Department of Human Rights. We appreciate your work. We appreciate the collaboration, and of course, we want that partnership to continue. And with that, I'd like to invite up to the podium Councilman Vita, who is the chair of our Public Safety Committee. You'll hear from a number of others, and then we will open it up to questions. I also want to say thank you to the press and the media for covering this throughout. It's a lengthy report that we received this morning. I'm sure you've been reading as quickly as possible to make sure that you all get the right questions to ask here today. So thank you. And with that, I'll invite up to the podium Councilmember Latricia Vita. Thank you so much for being here.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Councilmember Latricia Vita, and I represent the 4th Ward. I'm also the chair of Public Health and Safety. As the mayor said, we received this report this morning, and this report has some serious and troubling concerns. But as a Black woman, none of this comes as a surprise to me. I'm committed to working with the Department of Human Rights, Mayor Frey, my council colleagues, the community, and MPD to implement much-needed reform. Developing and sustaining a culture of anti-racism, accountability, and respect at MPD will take all of us working together. This is going to be a very hard job, but I'm up for the task, and so is everyone else in the city enterprise. I look forward to working with all of them in the near future. Thank you. Mayor, I think you're coming back.
Thank you, Council Member. I'd like to bring up Interim Chief Huffman, who can also provide some words and a course. Interim Chief.
Thank you, Mayor. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for being here today. This morning, the Minnesota Department of Human Rights briefed us and then released a report detailing findings from the agency's pattern and practice investigation of the Minneapolis Police Department. While we have not yet had the opportunity to fully digest this report, the points raised are deeply concerning to everyone standing before you today. We will review this report in collaboration with city leadership and community members to ensure that we have a clear understanding of every issue that was raised. We'll also continue to cooperate with the ongoing investigation being conducted by the Department of Justice. During the nearly 2-year period of this investigation, the department has been moving forward with reforms, and we're not waiting to move forward at this point to build a stronger department. We're committed to providing effective, constitutional police service, the service that people across our community want and need and deserve. We come to work each day to care for and safeguard our community members, protecting lives and safety, promoting the peace, and preserving the rights of each person. That is why we became police officers. And I expect every officer and civilian employee in the Minneapolis Police Department to treat all members of the community with dignity and respect. There is no place in the Minneapolis Police Department for bias or discrimination. We will continue to work by engaging with one another and our community partners to build stronger relationships, promote the public trust, protect the community and officer safety through ongoing investments in our people, our training, our policies, and our processes. These investments include the duty to intervene training for all members of the department, research-based de-escalation and communication department training also for the entire department, improving our curriculum and instruction through the hiring of an adult education and curriculum development specialist, staffing a quality assurance unit with professional auditors to ensure that every reform is having its intended effect, adding a new layer of force review to increase supervision and accountability, and developing new pathways into the Minneapolis Police Department for young people growing up in our community who have the desire to serve and protect. We have challenges ahead, but I am confident that there are men and women in the Minneapolis Police Department who have the desire to meet the challenges of today and tomorrow. As always, I'm grateful to be part of the Minneapolis Police Department, and I'm thankful for our officers who continue in their steadfast commitment to public safety, professionalism, and respect. And to my officers, I recognize the courage, selfless service, and compassion displayed by MPD officers working throughout the city, from running toward the sound of gunfire to render first aid and apprehend an offender, to rescuing a person in crisis from grave peril, to doing the complex work necessary to bring cases into the criminal justice system and provide a pathway to justice for victims of crime, and much more. Your work matters. Thank you. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Chief. Now I would like to bring up our Director of Regulatory Services, Saray Garnett-Hachuli.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Today is a heavy day, and as Councilmember Vita said, this news is not a surprise to the Black community, and it's not a surprise to me. What pains me in this is that we needed a report to validate what Black people have been saying for decades, years. My father told me stories of his experience. And I stand here torn because I work for the city of Minneapolis, but I'm also have been a victim of inappropriate activities from a police officer, not here in Minneapolis. But what I want to say is that I will not be tokenized. I stand here because I believe in the city of Minneapolis. I believe in the fact that this has to change. We have to change. We have to own our behavior, own our policies, own everything that we do, and change. The city cannot sustain it, our employees cannot sustain it, and our residents cannot sustain this way of being. So I challenge all of us to do right by the city, to do right by our employees. You have my attention. I'm watching. I will course correct if I see something wrong because I do sit in a position of power. And I will not sit silently when I see something wrong. Today, we were briefed after the mayor was briefed with this information. I don't know if that would have changed before the new government structure. We have been talking, the silos are down, and I work with every department head in complicated issues. So I look at this as, no, this isn't new, but I do look at this as true transformational change. I'm not interested in change on the surface. I'm going deep and I'm going to the root. And I will hold the mayor accountable. I will hold interim chief accountable. And I will hold myself accountable because I'm here to lead and to institute change in anything that I do and I touch in any room that I am in. So that is my commitment to the Black community, that is a commitment to my Black employees, and it's a commitment to my parents and my father and my ancestors, because this has to change. Thank you.
Thank you, Director. The reason we wanted to have these extraordinary staff and leaders stand up here with us today is to show that this is an all-in approach. We've got a united front, galvanized around making the necessary change and the culture shift that we need to see, not just in the police department, but throughout our city. And much of this is enabled, and the comprehensive approach that we want to see is in part made by the change to the government structure that was passed this last year. There's still work to be done to set a lot of these pieces up, but that's taken place right now. And with that, we will open it to questions.
Mayor Frey, some of the criticisms in this report are recent, within the last 2 years, of reforms that you have said that you are going to make, and it criticizes the city for not following through and actually implementing policies. How can you reassure people in Minneapolis that you are serious in making changes, and what specifically are you going to do to hold the Minneapolis Police Department more accountable?
We are dead serious in making these necessary changes. And it's not as if the changes begin today. There are quite a few reforms that have taken place both before George Floyd was murdered and after, both in this administration and in administrations prior. Now, am I going to stand up here and argue to you that it's been enough? No, it has not. We have to go further. We have to be more deliberate. It's not enough just to have a policy change on paper if that policy isn't ultimately implemented in full and then carried out. And if you look at the areas that are addressed in the report itself, there are policies that have even recently been shifted to account for the shortcomings that we've seen. In the area of discipline and outcomes, we've embedded a city attorney in the disciplinary process to make sure that these investigations are conducted as thoroughly as possible and to expedite them as quickly as possible. We're hiring 2 new Minneapolis Police Department auditors. OPCR, the Office of Police Conduct and Review, has doubled investigative staff. We've got a discipline matrix which has been amended once several years ago. We're in the process and final stages here of amending it yet again to make sure that, again, we're able to hold officers accountable. In training, I mean, there's new trainings that have been implemented both under my administration as well as previous, from procedural justice training to implicit bias training. To ABLE training more recently, making sure that we've got active bystander training in place. There's a duty to intervene, there's a duty to de-escalate, and there's a duty to then report when those ideals and those values that we insist upon are not upheld in full. We've got an early intervention system that will be built out in the coming months and years. Got a new crowd control policy, limitations on pretext stops and lower level traffic offenses, and then we're making improvements on areas of communication, body-worn camera policies, etc. Now, none of these things, taken either individually or as a whole, are enough. Anyone that tells you differently is full of it. Yeah, we need to go further. And I am a believer that part of instilling accountability is both letting officers with precision know what is to be expected. They want to know what they are being asked to do with precision, and I think that's fair. It's about making sure that we've got management over top that is able to, on a day-to-day basis, manage accountability. 1, manage a comprehensive approach. 2, manage response in the immediacy. 3, manage emergency situations arise. 4, I could go on and on. But the point is that you need an integrated approach in order to do that. That is a direction where we're moving right now. Clearly, we have a whole lot of work left to go.
What is the timeline for that?
For purposes of the government structure, we're hoping to get things set by the end of a year.
In terms of the accountability, I mean, there were issues in this report that talked about the failure of following up when there are complaints against officers.
You named several different issues there. Some of them are already being addressed. Some of them, there are still work to be done. Like I said, I read this report for the first time today and haven't even gotten through every single word yet. I want to make sure that we're able to digest this in full, make the necessary changes that we can in the immediacy, and also making sure that we're taking a real deliberate approach.
So you have not read this. Is the city open to a consent decree, and does that require approval from the mayor and council?
Question was, are we open to a consent decree, and does it require approval from the mayor and the council? As far as approval goes, I imagine the answer is yes, but I would have to consult with our city attorney before determining the process that would need to take place. Look, we're open. It would be irresponsible for me to stand up here today prior to digesting the report in full and to give you and the general public full clarity of direction. We have this report, which has been issued. We have a Department of Justice investigation that is ongoing right now, and we need to do right by our black community. We need to do right by our city. We also need to acknowledge that decisions that are made today will have long-lasting impact to present and future administrations, and so we got to get this right.
So there are a lot of pretty egregious things in this report, but you can almost take it to the low level and say something that really stands out is the slurs being used against residents, and also the way that officers speak to people in the community. So that's witnesses, bystanders, etc., using profanity and that sort of thing. Why, over so many administrations, so many different chiefs, has the department not been able to fix this one simple problem that officers should not be using profanity and slurs against residents here?
So the question, in case it wasn't heard by the general public, is why does this kind of conduct continue? Whether it's slurs or profanity, and as you mentioned, it's spanned multiple administrations, multiple chiefs. This report goes back now 12 years ago, but it was encompassing for about 10 years, and it doesn't take a genius to guess that it was going on before that as well. So the question you asked is, why does this keep happening? I think if I gave you one simple answer, it wouldn't be fair and it wouldn't be honest. There's systemic racism in our entire society. Let's just acknowledge that. It's not limited to any single department. It's not limited to any single group or people. It's a reality that we need to deal with. And, you know, we also collectively need to own where we've messed up, own where there have been shortcomings, but most importantly, chart a clear path forward. You know, and something that I think has become readily apparent to me and to my administration is that it can't be about one person or one administration or even one city. The systemic inequities associated with policing and more broadly in society are poignant and obvious in Minneapolis, but it's not limited to our city either. I think it's going to require very much an all-hands-on-deck effort. And so we got to take responsibility. The state's got to take responsibility. The feds got to take responsibility. Each and every person out there has a role to play. Nobody should be backing down. Everybody should be pulling up a chair.
Respectfully, I'm just asking, where is the breakdown in discipline here? Why are sergeants, for instance, who are overseeing officers, not being disciplined when this happens under their watch? Why has this happened for years and years and years? This seems like a basic thing. There are high-level things to deal with, but this is something that seems like it should be easy. Why is the police department and the chiefs and yourself not?
Believe me, yeah, there's more than a few times where you say to yourself, it seems like it should be easy. Let's just get this done. And you know, we're speaking in generalities here, but the requirement is that we got to get specific. I can't comment on each one of these individual instances that you're referencing because I imagine that they're all different, but there is truly a common thread, especially if you read the report. And it's that common thread that we're trying to pull at as much as possible to get the honesty and get the truth.
Is it even possible to reform the police department, given that the police department has experienced drops in officers who are continuing to work for the city, given everything that's been going on over the past couple of years? Is it even possible to reform the system?
I think there are many people that will take this opportunity to ask the question is, why would anybody join the Minneapolis Police Department right now? And my response is, this is an opportunity for people to join the police department that want to be the change that we're all insisting upon. They want to be part of that culture shift. They want to protect and keep people safe. They want to treat people with dignity and respect, the kind of dignity and respect that this report shows has often been missing. And by the way, you know, and I mentioned this earlier, the report clearly pointed out the need for a culture shift. It pointed out massive issues, issues that we're not citing for the first time today, but some of certainly the underpinning facts you are seeing for the first time. And additionally, you know, I think there are officers that are also reading this report and saying to themselves, this is awful. That's not who we want to be. And for those that are saying that, and for those potential recruits that are wanting to be that change, yeah, we want to have you serve in the city.
To follow up on specifically the question involved.
I just want to make sure we get others, and then I promise I'll come back to you.
I am going to ask this question.
That's fine.
You know, there was 700 hours of body camera footage. There were documents that were provided. We thank your city staff for providing those documents. This was all on record that this was happening in many of these cases. It's detailed in this report, so why wasn't this addressed? And I don't know if that's a question you would like to answer or if the interim chief would like to answer, but this was on camera, so to speak.
Yep. So again, it requires us to get into each one of the specific incidents. But I'd be happy to, Chief, if you care to address what we're able to. So much of this we're digesting now, and you're asking a general question which is going to require an answer with specificity. And we got to digest and dig into the report to give you something that's honest and fair.
So you can't answer why this wasn't addressed?
Why what specifically wasn't addressed?
The language, the offensive language that was mentioned in this report.
So the question is, why wasn't the racist language and the offensive language addressed? Look, I find it repugnant. There have been clearly directions given that this is not acceptable in any way, shape, or form. Directions given by this chief, former Chief Arredondo, and I'm sure former chiefs before that. The fact that there was ultimately a gap in those directions being carried out, and still the horrible conduct and statements that were made, I think shows the shortcomings that collectively need to be fixed.
But I think part of Callan's point is there were supervisors, sergeants, leaders in the police department who, it says in the report, ignored this, did nothing about it. I mean, how do you respond to that? If you're saying there was change, there was people trying to do something about it, you know, saying that language is not okay, but then this report is saying sergeants, leaders were not doing anything about it. And I guess, and second part of that question, will there be discipline now after this report? Now that we've
Yeah.
seen that.
The report itself covers 10 years, potentially even beyond that. And so, again, I can't comment on each individual case, not because we're hiding anything, but because I don't know. And I want to give you accurate information. This covers a very wide swath of time and a very large number of incidents that we're going to have to dig into. To the second part of your question, many of the individuals that have been referenced aren't with the police department anymore. I can't speak to the full scope, and that's what we need to dig into in the immediacy to figure out how we make sure that that accountability is there now and going forward.
Last question.
State investigators said this pattern of discriminatory policing could continue in part because of a lack of consistent action by both current and former city officials. Do you feel they've characterized your efforts to change policing adequately, and why should people have faith in you that this will be the time the meaningful change occurs?
You know, the report, as you mentioned, called out the lack of consistent action by a number of mayors and leaders and chiefs in our city throughout at least the last 10 years. I won't speak for any other mayors, and I'll say, look, I think we need to be doing more. I think the action needs to not just be more consistent, but implemented more fully. There hasn't been a lack of policy changes. We have dug in and delivered quite a few policy changes both before and after George Floyd was murdered. Prior mayors have delivered policy changes. As has been pointed out, though, policy changes are not the whole game. A true culture shift is about people. It is about personnel. It's getting the right individuals in. It's getting the wrong individuals out. There's quite a bit of work to be done there. Are we there yet? No, we're not. But you've got a united team here that is fully embracing the shortcomings, both past and present, previous administrations and this one, to get this right. So the message here is one of a unified response because, as I mentioned earlier, other cities have had investigations. Other cities have had consent decrees and receiverships. Other cities have had shortcomings in policing. And obviously, Minneapolis does as well. What we want to make sure is that we're seizing this particular moment, these particular findings, and then doing right with precision. Thank you, everybody.
Minneapolis Police Department is using covert social media accounts to target black leaders and black community members.
So I'm going to take one more, and then we're going to leave. So the question was around the covert social media accounts.
Were you aware that MPD officers were doing that?
So our investigative team obviously conducts investigations, and they obviously gather intelligence through covert accounts in general. Were we aware of the specifics and the misuse that was outlined in the report? Was I? No. Thank you, everybody.